Today, I want to talk about the idea of rest. When we think about rest, I think sometimes we think that's what happens after the work is done. Rest is what takes place when we have nothing left on our list, everything has been checked off. But the reality is, rest is something we can be incorporating all throughout our day, all throughout our lives. It can take place throughout the normal rhythms of our routines, the processes, the things that we're doing throughout the day. You can rest even while you're at work. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But I want to start by reading a couple statistics here. We have a statistic that says 95% of human HR experts believe that high employee turnover results from job burnout. High employee turnover resulting from job burnout. Another one says close to 53% of workers feel they need work life balance for their total well being. And lastly, nearly 66% of workers admit that they have no work life balance, even though they recognize it's needed. So we know the need for it. I think that's the conflict that we so often find is we know the need for it. We know we're designed to with limitations. We have a wall that we're going to hit if we keep going. And yet we find ourselves unable to limit ourselves. We often push the boundaries of really what our bodies are able to do healthily. And we go so far past that we actually begin to enter into the zone of exhaustion, of unhealth, of mental instability. There was a news organization in Thailand. I found this really interesting report. News organization in Thailand is being investigated by the country's labor ministry after an employee died while working at his desk. 44-year-old man, he was collapsed at his desk after suffering a heart attack at the Thai news network. They said he worked as the senior manager in charge of program schedules. He was allegedly heavily overworked, also suffering underlying conditions including diabetes and high blood pressure. A now deleted post said that he would often work 7 days a week. It also says he was forced to do so because there was nobody in the company who could stand in for him, and he was recently called back from his sick leave to finish off work. So this guy's working 7 days a week, at least 8 hours, probably more, and ends up dying at his desk at the age of 44 of a heart attack. Pure exhaustion, pure overwork. How awful is that? Can you imagine dying at your desk? And I think sometimes we don't realize that that's the direction we're headed. Okay, maybe we don't physically get to this point where we're actually dying in our workplace. However, I think sometimes we end up working ourselves so hard. We're so focused on everything on the list, all the busyness, all the bustle, and we don't realize that, retirement isn't coming if we don't actually plan ahead. Rest doesn't just wait until you're ready for it. Rest is something we incorporate sooner, or else we end up in a place where we may suffer many deaths before we die. If you've heard the phrase, basically, your marriage is going to suffer, your emotional well-being. When we are overworked and we don't incorporate rhythms of rest, we're going to suffer. It's going to have a lot of negative impacts on us. Isaiah 30, verse 15 says, "For thus says the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel, in returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and confidence shall be your strength. But you would not." So interesting that the Lord is putting this message out to Israel, and he's saying, it's in the place of returning to me. In other words, you think that your work is going to get you there. You think your work is what's going to accomplish your own success, fulfill your needs, take care of your family. At the end of the day, we're limited in what we can do. He is unlimited. And he says, if you come to me, that's where you're going to find salvation. If you come to me, that's where you're going to find the resources for everything you need, but not just in returning to him. He actually says, in returning and rest. See, the position of rest says, my hands are empty. There's nothing I can do. It's actually a position of surrender. When you are resting, when you're reclining, when you're laying down, when you are in the posture of not focusing on all of the work, you are taking your hands off of the wheel. You're taking your hands off and you're saying, God, what are you going to do here? Because I've put my energy and my work into it. I've been faithful, right? But now I'm stepping back to rest because I trust that you're going to complete it. Paul actually says, what I began, the Lord will be faithful to complete. And if we can have that mentality that says, I'm not going to take the full responsibility for all of these different outcomes that could take place in my life. I'm actually going to leave those in the Lord's hands. I'm going to be responsible with what I've been given. I'm not just going to sit around. But I'm going to actually choose to return to the Lord, to seek his opinion, to seek his heart, and to stay in a place of rest. I think one of the things that comes into play here is done is better than perfect, right? And sometimes we think we want to make everything so perfect and we focus so hard on the list and getting everything just right. And sometimes it's like, look, done is better than perfect means actually sometimes we can choose when we're done. Sometimes we can say, you know what, this is done. It's not perfect, but it's done. And we take that moment to pause. We take that moment to pull back and release and let the Lord see what he wants to do. When you look at creation, man was made on the sixth day, and on the seventh day, God rested. So, what that means is the first full day that man was on the earth was a day of rest. For God, he started out with work. Days 1 through 6, he's building, he's creating, and day 7, he rests. It's so interesting, though, that God began with work, but man began with rest. The first day that man was on the planet was the day of peace, the day of rest, the day of not doing anything. Anybody who's been in any sort of business knows the work is never done. The list is never complete. It keeps going on and on. And listen, I think sometimes we fool ourselves into thinking, I'm gonna actually get it all done. I'm gonna get to the end point. And we see this picture of us and there's nothing on our list and we're laying on a beach and that seems wonderful. But at the end of the day, there's always something more on the list. There's always more to be done. The question is, when are you going to call it enough and actually take a break? One of the things that I do that I incorporate into my life is what I call micro breaks. Micro breaks means I might take a bath in the middle of the day, I pause, and for 30 or 40 minutes, I go up and I just am doing nothing. I'm in the bath, I put some music on, I put on a good podcast, I get my soul fed, I spend time with the Lord in prayer and contemplation, I get scripture on, I have a great audio Bible that I read and listen to. And that is a micro break in the middle of my day. That's a Sabbath. Listen, Sabbath doesn't just happen once a week. And it's important. I think it's valuable. If you're not taking one day a week to actually make that a day of rest, a day of pausing, you need to be doing that. We need to incorporate that into the rhythms of our life. But what would happen if we actually say, in the middle of my day, I'm going to pause, I'm going to take a break, I'm going to take a rest. I'm going to take, so many of us work without even taking a lunch break. I actually used to do this. I actually used to work and I would work through lunch. I would get to my workplace at 7 a.m. and I would work a straight 8 hours, no lunch break, and be done and leave. And it's not healthy. It's not good. I wasn't socializing with anybody, I wasn't building connections. It was very isolating. And I think when we do this, when we say, I just need to get to the end, we're actually harming ourselves. We're diminishing the importance, the value of what our bodies need, of what our minds need. And we end up serving all of the lists that are in front of us. And we don't actually get to the point of being able to accomplish those things well because we're drained. We're not healthy. Listen, on a good day, on a healthy day, I will accomplish 10 times as much as I can on a day when I'm just trying to get through. But that only comes with rest. That only comes with pausing, stepping aside, taking a break. One of the ways that I think about this also is even in terms of worship. I play guitar. I met my wife actually through leading worship. So that's been a big part of my story in my life. And when I'm leading worship, the way that I recognize a skilled musician, an experienced worship musician versus somebody that's just beginning out is how they handle the songs on the set. In other words, how much are they playing? A new musician is going to feel like I've got to play the entire time. A new musician, let's say they're on a guitar, they're going to be strumming the entire song and it's all going to be at 80% volume and it's going to be just consistent and they're in there in the mix. An experienced musician actually realizes the song itself, the music, the worship benefits when I pull back, when there's dynamics. So there are parts where it's intense and it's loud and we're going at it. And there's parts where we pull back and maybe I'm not playing at all. Maybe I've stopped and I'm letting everybody else shine. Maybe the keys are shining. Maybe the drums are going. Maybe something else is taking place and I'm able to pull back and say, this is not my moment. This is my moment of rest. Even in musical notation, you have the rest written in because it's such an essential part of that kind of beauty, of that kind of expression. And we need to make that a part of our normal rhythms. We need to realize that if we're always going at 100% intensity, it's going to be loud and we're going to come out exhausted And then we're trying to spend time with our spouse, you're trying to spend time with your kids, and you're drained. You don't have it in you. So I want to encourage us that as we look at the idea of rest, it doesn't just mean taking a day off. Rest actually is something that you build into the pattern of how you think, of how you live. Listen, the moments of gratitude and of connecting with the heart of God in a profound and a deep way most often come when I step back and rest. In the middle of my day, when I take a pause and I pull back and rest, I'm able to go, Lord, this this is a day you've given, and I can see that the fruit of what's going to come out of this day is not just what I've done, but it's what you're doing. I'm able to turn my eyes on him, my perspective shifts, and all of a sudden what I'm capable of accomplishing in that day is magnified, because it's not just my own strength that I'm working in anymore. I'm returning to him and I'm resting, and things shift. So as we look at rest, this really segues really well into the book that I just released, Making Margin. It came out on October 31st. We've had a full week of this being available, and it's been incredible. We actually hit number one bestseller in 3 different categories on Amazon.com. So super proud of this. Super excited for what it's going to do. Listen, this isn't an ego trip for me. This book is a profound lesson that I've learned over a period of years, and my heart is to pass it on to you, because I genuinely believe that what you can gain out of this is immeasurable. What the Lord has taught me, I'm taking lessons that, listen, I went through the sweat, the pain, the struggle. You don't have to. How many of you know that you can actually learn lessons from other people's lives? And that's my goal in this book, is actually to say, these are lessons that I've learned that I want to pass on to you so you don't have to go through the struggle. So you can get it on Amazon.com. Making Margin is the title. And lastly, if you are enjoying these podcasts, please subscribe, put a review down below, and share it with people you know. That's how this is going to grow. We're really excited for what's coming next. I've got an incredible podcast lined up for you next week, and even more coming down the pike. So thank you for being here, and God bless.